Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast podcast, YouTube video interview program that features me talking to some of the best and brightest in the atheist / secular / awesome community. This is episode number 188. I recorded this interview on April 13th, 2019, and you'll see what an amazing day it is when you listen to the full episode. Thanks to Bart Campolo, and no, you aren't the last guest in show history. I couldn't stop on 187, the murder episode. Check out his show, Humanize Me, and he can get you started on creating a local secular group. We need people to play Cards Against Humanity with as much as we need to get involved in local politics and let people know that we exist. I have my first father-son team this week. Ed Buckner is the former American Atheist president and reminds me that he's the former and not current board member of the Atlanta Freethought Society. Michael Buckner is a son, never got into religion, and is a board member of the Atlanta Freethought Society. We talked about local groups, their book, and how the separation of church and state is always a timely topic. Beers consumed were Monday night slush fund, a cherry limeade goza, and Combs, a Baltic porter from Poland. Let's start the conversation.
We atheists feel that it's a rather despicable motivation for anybody to be good because they'll get heaven or get hell if they're bad. We feel that we can be decent, kind, and loving people simply because we're human beings and this is the best way to go.
Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast! Ed and Michael Buckner, welcome aboard.
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have to sing?
You do not have to sing. It's always up to you. We'll open it up to talent show, special skills later in the show. I'd like to kind of finish off on that note, but we will get going. So I heard, we have a father-son duo. Actually, the last guest I had was on Bart Campolo, and he's an ex-evangelical, and he wrote a book with his dad, who still is a believer. So it's cool that we have the father-son continuum going on. But Ed, you mentioned before the show that today's date, April 13th, proves there's a God. Maybe you could help us out with that.
Well,
then I can cancel this podcast because
that's right.
Prove me wrong.
You probably should.
Yes.
Fine-tuning argument, kind of a proof, and the Christians are very fond of fine-tuning arguments, but it's just this astonishing coincidence that just could not have happened if it had not been designed by a creator designer. And that is the fact that there are three major important atheist, freethinkers, secularists, secular humanists, church-state separationists, whose birthday is today. The most prominent one from our point of view is probably Madalyn Murray O'Hair, who's exactly 100 years old today, or would be if she hadn't been murdered, and not because she was an atheist, by the way. And Thomas Jefferson was born 269, I think it was, 276 years ago, and Christopher Hitchens was born exactly 70 years ago. So obviously God meant for atheists to be drawn a lot of attention to, and furthermore, Ed and Michael on the Zachrilege podcast, that's probably the killer blow to the whole argument.
Yeah,
definitely. And
he looks skeptical.
He looked dubious.
It's unfortunate. There's a Netflix movie about Madalyn Murray O'Hair, and it's really not good. I think you may have written I saw something on Patheos about people who actually knew her, about how inaccurate it was.
Well, there's very mixed feelings about it. I didn't know her. I corresponded with her one time. She was an important icon in my family of origin, but it was very much a negative icon. And there was actually a bit of a dispute between my father and her, oddly enough. But anyway, the whole business with Madalyn Murray O'Hair and her importance doesn't have a whole lot to do with the fact that today is her birthday. I haven't watched that movie that you mentioned, but I know a fair number of people who have watched it who know her. Some of them were fairly well impressed with it, others not so much. There's some things in it that are definitely a matter of artistic license and are not specifically accurate in that regard. So, but it's a movie. It's not. You can't sum up a person's entire life in
Wow.
even a really well done movie. So
Yeah, in a way, it's like, well, there's an actual podcast that does, atheist reviewing Christian movies. GAM, they're actually going to be at the American Atheist conference in 1 week. What timing?
Yeah.
But there aren't that many movies that have atheist characters or are about atheism. And just because of the depth of her story and then the whole way her life ended, it almost seems like it needs to be one of those 10 episode shows at least.
Yeah.
To really cover it, but it did kind of happen. I did want to talk. I mean, obviously the two of you wrote a book together. And you have a copy with you.
To have a copy here.
But I kind of thought maybe we go back a bit, and this might start with Ed and go to Michael.
Sure.
What kind of religious background did you have? And one thing I've noticed doing this show, it's a lot of preachers' kids becoming atheists kind of story. Yet you two both seem to be atheists. So Ed, you broke the mold, and Michael, you've kept it going. So
there you go.
I don't know. Maybe you can just talk about the background there.
Well, my father was an Episcopal clergyman. I loved him dearly. I never had a rebellion or a big fight against him. He was obviously quite religious. My mother was much more pious than he was. They're both dead now. And they weren't very happy when I came out as an atheist, which I was an atheist long before I told them about it, but I did in due course tell them. It's a long and winding history and mostly of interest to my family members and not probably to many other people. My son here was raised by two atheists and has never been one of them mere believer types.
Never been baptized.
No.
Actually, my mom was never baptized either. She's a lifelong atheist. My grandmother on that side was, I don't think she would ever use the A word, but
no.
she just didn't believe in any of that. There's kind of this strain on my mom's side, going back to the generations of just sort of matter-of-fact non-believers in her family.
Yeah. Village atheist and what have you.
Well, it's impressive that you're keeping it going.
Yeah.
So what made the two of you decide to kind of work together to write the book In Freedom We Trust?
It started long before the book started. I kept writing, especially to the local rag, the Marietta Daily Journal, letters to the editor about church-state separation, but also about atheism. And Michael picked up the habit after he grew up and went to college and became an independent adult and wrote letters to the editor too, which he would send me a copy of, and he always called himself Chip when he did that, Chip off the old block. He'd never been called Chip in any other context. But anyway, we both kept running up against all these myths and lies and misperceptions and misunderstandings about church-state separation, partly about atheism too. And we decided we needed to have a comprehensive book on the subject. I started the book. I wrote the majority, but not 80%, probably 60% or 55% of the material in the book. But Michael wrote some of the was a primary author for some of the chapters. We both wrote all of the chapters together. I mean, we went back and forth with various iterations of chapters and text. But I don't know, Michael, it was a great pleasure for me. Yeah. I'm very child-centered, adult-centered now, and delighted to work with my son. It was a great pleasure to work with him on this intellectual undertaking.
I was also just going to mention, before this book, we'd had an earlier project that wasn't nearly as slick and fancy, just quotations that support the separation of state and church. It was just a sort of more or less self-published little thing. And it was just a compilation of quotations from everything from state constitutions to founding fathers, the treaty with Tripoli, supporting the idea that this is a secular country and should be. It actually started out, I think I had just made a text file of maybe just 3 or 4 juicy quotations from the treaty with Tripoli, Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptist, the wall of separation, a few other quotations, one from Washington, and then he kind of took that and ran.
Franklin one.
There was a Benjamin Franklin. He kind of took that and ran with it, and we got all kinds of lengthy, detailed, and well-documented sources, sort of an attempt to push back at the David Bartons of the world with their sort of myths about the founding fathers founding this as a Christian nation and claiming that this is founded as a Christian nation.
He said it was self-published. Actually, it was published by the Atlanta Freethought Society. Several different versions or editions of it were published. It's still available from the Atlanta Freethought Society. You have one thing wrong on your info at the bottom of the cast, and that is that I am a board member for the Atlanta Freethought Society. I have been an officer and a board member in the past, but haven't been in some years. Michael is the one who is a board member for the Atlanta Freethought Society. And
the good news is it all can be edited. We can pretend this never happened. Well, not the interview, but the description.
Yeah, right.
It's usually, you write a book and you do editing and you work together. I just put some together and, someone can tell me I'm wrong. I'll make adjustments if necessary.
Well, you're going to sue, so it's important that you get it right.
I know atheists have deep pockets, right?
Shallow pockets? Is that it?
Oh, yes. You want to mention, I don't know if I've said it yet, but yes, this is one of the few interviews I've done where everybody is in Atlanta. I don't know if we're in the same part of Atlanta. And I'm drinking an Atlanta beer. I just want to say the beer because I know Jeannie and Deborah, who are in the chat room, will appreciate the fact that I'm drinking a beer that is based on basically a cherry limeade. So that's what it tastes like.
Okay.
I'm a fan of beer. I'm not so sure about the cherry limeade beer, but
that's probably the kind of frou-frou drink I would like. I don't really like alcohol very much. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's not bad.
I'll tell you much more about the book. I could read you the entire book.
We're gonna get there. So like initially, maybe how did it change, or what do you maybe just give kind of the elevator pitch for when you got maybe close to finished and decided that this might be something you're going to get published?
Well, we tried a variety of possibilities for publishers, wound up with Prometheus Books, which publishes a fair number of atheist titles. It was actually the publisher who asked that we put the word atheist in the subtitle. That subtitle has confused a few people. The title of the book is In Freedom We Trust, subtitle An Atheist Guide to Religious Liberty. And there's some people who think that means it's a book promoting atheism. We're both atheists. We don't hesitate to tell people we're atheists. I've had debates where I've defended atheism and be happy to do it again. But this book is not primarily a book about atheism. Incidentally, it is in passing a book about atheism, but primarily it's a book about church-state separation, about secularism, and why that is consistent with American history throughout our history, and why it's in everyone's best interest, not just atheists' best interest. Oversensitive, prickly atheists are not the ones who need to have church-state separation. So it took a lot longer than I thought it would to get the book generated and published and edited and all that sort of thing. It's been out for 6-7 years now, going on 7 years. And it's readily available in lots of libraries. I'm proud of that. And it's also, you can get a copy of it for $2 or $3 from some aftermarket on Amazon. We're not interested in selling the book. We are very interested in having people read the book. So if you get a copy from the library, or if you go to the American Atheist Convention in Cincinnati next week, they will probably have a few copies of it for sale in the book and product room. And Michael and I will both be there, so we can sign it for you if you like. But selling the book is not the primary, never was, actually. Yeah. Book writers don't make money unless they're named Stephen King or something like that.
And just to sort of emphasize one point about this, the fact that this is an atheist guide to religious liberty, you can think we're totally wrong about the existence of God and still agree with practically everything we say in this book because this is really about politics and government and the proper relation of religion to politics.
And well, go ahead. You started.
Now, why do you think that so many Christians in America, especially in government, do not see that the separation of church and state protects them as well?
Well, honestly, misinformation. And some of that misinformation has been quite deliberately promulgated by greedy preachers and theists and that sort of thing, people who want power or money or both. But some of it, at least, is honest misunderstanding. They truly don't understand what it means to say this is a free country, not a Christian nation. And it's not, our Constitution doesn't have the word atheist in it, but it also doesn't have the word Christian in it. We are not founded as a Christian government. And that goes all the way back. That's not just some recent Supreme Court decision that said Madalyn Murray O'Hair can throw prayer out of school or something. It's part of American history all the way through and through and through. And the framers were quite extensive and effective in their writing about this. So there's plenty of information to support the point of view we're supporting in this book. And it's not that, if I say this is a Christian nation and you say, what do you mean by that? If I say, well, all I mean by that is a majority, it's, as Michael has said earlier today, it's not really as big a majority as it used to be, but a majority of people in this country would still, if asked, are you a Christian, probably say yes. They'd mean all kinds of different things by that, and they wouldn't agree with each other. You got, Pete Buttigieg running for president, who's a Christian and who's attacking Mike Pence, who says he's a Christian. And they don't mean the same thing by the term at all. They have very different ideas, and lots of other people do too. But there's a self-interest in Christian leaders in trying to persuade people that their official position is the quote correct one and deserves to be supported by all good moral people. And the confusion about whether atheists are in fact capable of being moral or regularly moral and all that sort of thing is certainly part of the lying and the myths and the misunderstanding that goes back all along also. You want to add something?
Well, I would also say historically, there was this longstanding idea, even among people who weren't very religious, that a society had to have a degree of religious uniformity in order to have social peace. And I think the experience of history has shown that that's pretty much the exact opposite, that allowing religious pluralism is the best way to diffuse the differences. If you try to force everybody to conform, that's when you get persecution and religious war and violence and a lot of social problems.
And the framers didn't just kind of stumble into this neutral business. No. They were acutely aware, based on their own knowledge of European history and other history, that vicious warfare has been done in the name of religion, especially in their experience, especially Christianity. And Madison and Jefferson in particular, Washington and Franklin and others as well, but Madison and Jefferson were firm about the fact that you need to have the government stay out of it and have a multiplicity of sects, and S-E-C-T-S, not S-E-X. And I don't know what they would have thought about theys and so forth. But anyway, the whole idea of having competing interest in general, but especially religious interest, is something that they were very conscious of and eager to enhance and support, and to keep government out of making any religious decisions for any individual citizen.
It's something that, this is sort of post-book, because this book was actually published back in 2012, something that's become pretty acutely obvious, to sort of talk from a religious perspective. When you mix religion and politics, what can happen is you can really corrupt your religion. And I think we're seeing that with the white evangelicals and the person they seem to be really supporting for as president, who I'm not a Christian and never have been, but Donald Trump does not strike me as a very Christian person. Even from their point of view, it seems like he's a bad man, and yet they're devoutly supporting him. And I think in the long run, that's going to hurt the evangelicalism in the United States.
Some evangelicals think that as well and have said so. Not most.
Yeah, I would hope so. Definitely. I was wondering, I mean, it's been, I think, 7 years since the book came out, or 6.5. If there have been, if you would rewrite it or re-edit it, if you had to make major changes, obviously the political system now, because we had a black president who actually did go to church. I don't think, unless a golf course is a church, we don't see Trump actually go there. But do you think there would be updates you feel like you'd need to make?
Well, there's one chapter that would definitely get substantially revised, and we had a chapter on the presidential politics, specifically about the 2012 presidential campaign, put in at the suggestion of an agent. And that chapter, some of the things that are in there would still be applicable and interesting, but it would have to be completely rewritten. Most of the rest of it wouldn't.
Yeah.
There's very little else in the book that needs to be changed. In that chapter, we would talk about the possibility of destroying or hurting the religious.
I would say maybe more of an emphasis on just how shallow and hypocritical a politically active religion can become. That it's not even so much a question of genuine theocrats so much as it becomes a sort of a tribal identity that I would think a devout Christian would have problems with when these religious leaders are supporting this, man with 5 children by 3 different wives who made his money running gambling casinos and brags about sexually assaulting women. And even from a pretty strongly biblical evangelical point of view, it does not seem like this is, I'm kind of shocked this is the guy that they love so much. I really wouldn't have seen that coming, to be honest with you. So,
well, I know from discussions with at least one Trump supporter, one of my sisters, the thing they care about most is Roe v. Wade and pro-life. And the only reason she supported Trump, the reason she cared, but it was all the reason she needed, was to get somebody in there who would appoint a Supreme Court justice who might overturn Roe v. Wade. And it's possible she succeeded in that regard. It seems to me that she and everybody else who supported Trump based on any kind of religious idea would be very, very frightened about the possibility that Trump might wreck their religious reputation and their view of the world.
Well, there was just an article on CNN.com today that apparently the nuns, not necessarily atheists, but people who are not a member of any organized religion, are now basically tied or maybe a little ahead of Catholics and evangelical Christians in this country as the single largest religious viewpoint in the United States of America. I think Americans, especially younger Americans, are falling away from the church in increasing numbers. We're becoming more like Europe, where it's not that everybody's an atheist and it's not that there are no Christians, but we're seeing a major shift in the culture towards secularism. And I think, kind of hope that this whole debacle will accelerate that the young people will look at what these evangelical churches have done and say, well, this is hypocritical, and whether they have a belief in some higher power or not, they will fall away from organized evangelical Christianity and organized religion generally.
It's still an open question whether our book is the thing that did religion in.
Yes. Well,
I mean, probably, but you don't know for sure.
You caused this.
It's a long standard.
All 3,800 copies that were sold. That did it.
It
is. I don't know.
I guess it's easy to talk about kind of, the political field and the country in general, like when you wrote the book as opposed to when it came out. And then, of course, our current time. Like at the time this book came out was when it seemed like a lot of atheist books were coming out. Mm-hmm. And this was like at the dawn of kind of podcasts and shows about atheism that happened. Why is it, even though it seems like the nuns in general are going up, that there is no cohesion in terms of like an atheist community, even just for people to get together for a political reason? Not like we don't have to get along in any other way, but just for political reasons.
Well, we don't have a dogma. We don't have a leader who can specify this is what atheists think, nor do we have a listing somewhere. These are our 12 commandments. There have been a variety of spoofs of that have listed 10 or 12 or whatever commandments as appropriate, but it's not that atheists don't have that much in common with each other.
Right.
They have one thing that's very important in this culture in common with each other, but atheists are conservatives, they're liberals, they're socialists, they're libertarians. They have all kinds of different political and social ideas. And that's the way it's bound to continue to be, for the simple reason that we don't have a dogma or any way of establishing a dogma or any desire on the part of many of the atheists I know to set up a dogma.
I suppose there are even atheists who are not strong supporters of separation of church and state. There are atheists who, I think they're pretty cynical and elitist, but they think, well, it's okay for me, but we want to keep the masses in line, and therefore it's good if we have a more or less official religion. I would think that one thing that would unite most of the none of the aboves would be just a commitment to equality, equal justice before the law, and that means secular government, not atheist government. We don't want the government promoting atheism, but a government that respects everyone's rights equally. I mean, one point that the article made, the CNN article, is that the none of the aboves are now a huge demographic part of the United States, but we have almost no political representation. I mean, finding any kind of atheist representative of openly atheists or openly non-religious people in Congress is pretty hard to do. And I don't want congressmen who get up there and preach atheism, but I would like to see some elected officials who, when you ask them, what church do you go to, say, well, I'm an atheist, but here are my political positions, here's my philosophy, here's what I do believe in. And we don't really have that yet.
Well, in your description for the book, you say that you are free thinker, secular humanist, and atheist. Do you see big distinction? Do you think that might be where some people kind of part ways in terms of the atheist community?
There are a variety of labels that are adopted by different atheists or free thinkers or secular humanists or rationalists or brights or what have you. And there isn't a right term. My view is people get to call themselves whatever they want. And if you say, well, the correct term is this, and you're chicken shit if you don't agree with us, well, that's just not the way it's done. Again, we don't have a dogma. We don't have a leader to specify what the right term is. I use all of those terms at different times in different settings and different circumstances. They do have slightly subtle variations in meaning, and not all free thinkers would be people I would consider to be atheists, though most of them would be. And not all atheists would be secular humanists, although probably, at least in the U.S., most of them would be. Some of the more libertarian versions might not agree with that term.
We're not totally unique in this. I mean, one person could be Christian, evangelical, Protestant, born again, and Baptist, and have distinctions in all of those terms. I mean, I would say atheism is a conclusion about the existence of God. Freethinker is a question of process. How do you get to whatever your conclusions, whether you, like Jefferson, believe that there is a God, or like us, believe that there isn't? It's you rely on somebody else's authority or some sort of tradition, and a freethinker rejects that. And secular humanism is more, okay, we're not theists. What do we believe in terms of how we relate to our fellow human beings, and what sort of ethics we follow? So it's not at all a dogmatic position.
Well, I was thinking in terms of the timing. The book came out was 2012, and I noticed at the time, because Mitt Romney was running, and he's very well known as a Mormon, there are all these billboards that came out saying that basically Mormonism is Christianity. And really, if you got Mormons and Christians together, there'd probably be not much they would get along with. But somehow they were able to kind of vote as a block.
Well, the church...
how we get it past that.
The church is not called the Mormon Church officially. It's actually the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints, and they consider themselves Christians. Now, quite a few Christians don't accept Mormons as Christians. And, there are, throughout human history, there are conflicts over what's a true Scotsman, what's a true Presbyterian, or a true Christian, or a true Catholic, etc. And those are essentially irresolvable conflicts unless you have a pope who will make a declaration about it, or some other figure who is accepted as the leader and the one who pronounces it, or an allegedly sacred book that'll settle it. But all the sacred books that I know about are pretty ambiguous about lots of these things.
Yeah, I know that in the last few months, actually, there was a bit of a flap. The Mormons don't want to be called Mormons anymore. I guess they're just supposed to say the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints every single time, which we're not going to do. But I mean, I don't want to be a jerk and call people by a name they don't want to be called by. But if they're literally saying, I don't even think they want to use the abbreviation LDS anymore. It has to be the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Don't they sometimes call themselves saints?
Yeah, and the reality is we're probably, and apparently they've done this before, where their leader has said, let's stop using Mormon, and they go back to using Mormon. I mean, it wasn't something that was foisted on them. I think that was the name they've used themselves.
Their allegedly sacred text is called the Book of Mormon, and so that's where the Mormon bit comes from. But,
yeah, there's a lot of PR behind that.
Yeah, but
indeed.
Partly there are some major theological differences between whether they're Christians or other Christians, between Mormons and all the other people who identify as Christians. And I think there's a big push. I don't know if they're really changing the underlying dogmas, but they're trying to make the religion more mainstream, to make it seem like, no, we're just another brand of Christians rather than this completely different group with, wacky planets named Kolob and golden plates and extra scriptures beyond the King James Bible. And they're trying to de-emphasize that so they can fit in more with the other evangelicals.
I think they're cutting down.
Whether that's going to work or not.
I think they're cutting down on the number of teenage wives they have too.
Well, they had to ditch that a long time ago.
Yeah. And also accepting African Americans as actual people, that sort of thing.
It is actually kind of interesting. Historically, evangelicals, fundamentalists, whatever you want to call them, the hardcore Protestants, for example, were very anti-Catholic. I mean, they would say that, in the book of Revelation, when it talks about the whore of Babylon, that's the Pope. And that's something that in the last few decades has shifted. You see evangelicals and conservative Catholics working together. You see, people like Newt Gingrich convert to Catholicism and nobody bats an eye. There was a flap about the chaplainship, actually, for the House of Representatives. A bit of a flap about whether or not they should have a Catholic chaplain, and which is yet another argument for not having official.
Yeah, Congress. It was a big deal when JFK ran for president, being a Catholic. Yeah. Like, they thought he was going to go Pope first, and for some reason, we always have a ton of Catholic dudes in the Supreme Court.
Majority, 2/3 majority, or 6/9.
I think for a while there, everybody on the Supreme Court was either Catholic or Jewish. There were no Protestants.
I think Gorsuch is kind of halfway, sort of an Episcopalian or a Catholic, or maybe a little of both.
But it is interesting, though, that this once enormous theological and social gap between evangelicals and Catholics really seems to have shrunk.
Support for Israel, which in fact is basically support for the second coming, and it's definitely a pro-life thing.
Yeah,
not necessarily on the Supreme Court, but on the.
I think abortion is the big thing that's unified the religious right.
Yeah,
whether they're Catholics or
I agree.
And just had a law pass in Georgia that I think it's a ban on abortion at the 6-week point, which Georgia always seems to follow other states in that.
It's when the little baby's heart starts beating that then you can't murder him.
It's this is cropping up in multiple states. I think a really strong push to basically.
They're trying to lay the groundwork for a challenge to Roe v. Wade. Yeah. Whether that'll succeed or not, I don't know. I hope it won't, but I don't know.
And also, if they did overturn Roe v. Wade, I have no idea what the political consequences of that would be. I mean, I'm not rooting for it, but just as Roe v. Wade galvanized the religious right, overturning it might very well galvanize the left. It's hard to say.
I don't know. It seems like I see way more Democrats and people on the left taking right talking points and being like, well, I don't know about abortion. Like, they're not, you don't see a lot of Republicans being pro-choice. And if they are, they're definitely not leading with that.
Yeah.
I would say right now the Democratic Party on most issues has gotten sharply more willing to say we're on the left and we're progressive and we don't want to have compromise with those other guys for the obvious reasons since 2016. Abortion does seem to be one issue. Acceptance of LGBT people, things like that. It seems like that's swept the culture, and I don't think that's going to change. But even for millennials, there are still significant differences. From what I understand, there are still large numbers of young people who are pro-life as well as pro-choice. So that divide doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon.
Well, I'm going to give you the softest of softball questions, but since it's come up in your book, I think it's a good one for you to answer, and then I can grab another beer. Why does God have no place in our country's motto?
Because God, acknowledging a God means making a religious decision for citizens, and citizens should get to make those decisions for themselves. And in fact, the original motto didn't have any of that stuff. And I should let Michael talk about it because he's the one who pointed it out to me. But the original committee that was formed in order to choose a national motto, I think it included Benjamin Franklin, I'm not sure, was presented with one motto that included something about God, death to tyrants is worship of God or something, was rejected. And they chose E Pluribus Unum out of many one as the national motto. And it was not until the Joseph McCarthy era of the 1950s that In God We Trust was adopted as an official national motto. And Congress passed it, clearly an unconstitutional act, in my opinion.
Put it to you this way: in God we trust. Well, I don't trust in God because I'm an atheist. So either they're lying about what I believe, or they're saying I'm not part of the we, because that's the national motto of the United States. If a church wanted to put "In God We Trust" on their little sign outside the church, that wouldn't be a problem because they're a Christian church. Presumably they do all trust in God. But for Congress to say the American people trust in God, either they're lying or they're saying that we're not part of the American people, and I kind of have a problem with that.
Which is why our book is titled "In Freedom We Trust," of course.
Yeah, I don't know if in Georgia it's the standard, but I know it's one of the options for the license plate is to have "In God We Trust."
States seem to be doing that.
We need to alert the Georgia police, the Cobb County police, on the back of my car in the place where they allow you to put either your county name or "In God We Trust." It says "E Pluribus Unum." And it says that because I'm challenging the law. If I ever get a ticket for it, I'll go to court and challenge it. No, it's been on there for years. No cops ever looked at it or said anything. But if it ever happens, I'm going to challenge the law because I don't think the state should have anything to do with this. The state can certainly not prohibit somebody from having a bumper sticker that says "In God We Trust" on the back of their car. The problem and the reason the courts have left it alone is because the courts have they have been too lacking in courage when it comes to making decisions about "In God We Trust" being passed by the U.S. Congress in the 1950s. They're afraid of the lash, the pushback, the backlash, etc. And probably they're right politically, but the government of the United States, the courts, the school board, the Congress, the Georgia legislature, none of them have any right to make any decision about religion for me or for any other citizen. It's not a restriction on Christians. It's a restriction on government.
Also, we don't want to overstate this. It's not like there's some inquisition or it's the worst infringement anybody's ever come up with, but there is an insidious aspect to this. It's the national motto. Well, you can hardly say that it's a wrong thing to post the national motto in, for example, a school, right? I mean, it's a national motto. You can post the national motto in a school. And in fact, there have been pushes to do that. And that becomes a way to indoctrinate kids that, real Americans believe in God. Yeah. And that is disturbing to me, that this push to, I know there's also been some pushes to try to teach Bible courses in schools, which done properly could be valuable. I think people should know about the Bible, but the truth is it's a huge minefield, and a lot of the people who are pushing these courses, I don't think they're acting in good faith. They're trying to evangelize everyone's kids. And, it's one thing if you want to raise your own kids to be Christians, even that can be kind of problematic if it's a question of indoctrination, but they definitely do not have a right to use our tax dollars to indoctrinate everyone else's kids in their religion.
If a course was taught, Asimov's Guide to the Bible was the text, and it was taught by somebody who was neutral about the religious questions, I'd be in favor of that course. I think it's a matter of cultural literacy. I think Americans ought to understand, and Westerners in general, ought to understand a lot more about the Bible than most Christians do, as a matter of fact. But not to indoctrinate kids and not to have the government endorse any religious ideas, even this bland "in God we trust" idea.
Well, and I don't think it's as bland as they make it out to be. I mean, they act like, well, it's just, anybody could say that except for a filthy atheist or maybe a polytheist. But the truth is, it's covertly or not so covertly, it's much more of an evangelical Christian thing than they sometimes want to let on. And they talk out of both sides of their mouth on that.
There have been a few, not many, but a few Christians who have objected to having "in God we trust," or more specifically to having "under God" in the pledge, or "in God we trust" on the money, both, based on the fact that it's not Christian, that in fact it's sort of bland from their point of view and doesn't clearly identify loyalty to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And of course, the preamble to the Constitution, which invokes "we the people" and doesn't invoke any kind of gods, there were efforts in the 1890s, 80s and 90s, to pass a constitutional amendment to amend the preamble to the Constitution to say something about Jesus Christ. The organization that pushed for that was the NRA, but it wasn't the National Rifle Association. It was a different.
That was a little later,
the National Reform Association.
Yeah. It failed. It never got out of committee in Congress. They didn't want to mess with that. And happily it failed. It certainly should have failed.
Again, I mean, once you start deciding that we trust in a particular God, which God is it? And I was talking about the fact that, the evangelicals no longer talk about the Catholics being the Antichrist, but if we had anything like a theocracy, who knows that those divisions could come bubbling back up again, because is it going to be a Catholic God, an evangelical God, a Mormon God? I mean, everyone gets to choose for themselves, but if it becomes a single official standard, then
the original founding fathers' attitude about this goes back to their fear of too much government. They were afraid of government much more than they were afraid of other things. They wanted religious liberty, freedom of conscience, and they thought the best way to get that is just to say governments don't get to play. This is too important to let the government do anything about it.
To put it in Fox News Channel terms, we don't want socialized religion after all.
Yeah, that's right.
It's very social. They don't pay taxes. Oh, never mind. Well, let's talk about the local group that kind of the reason, I got you to be on the show, the Atlanta Freethought Society. Can you talk about the history of the Atlanta Freethought? Is it the Atlanta Freethought Tavern? Is that what it's called?
Atlanta Freethought Society.
Because
if it's a tavern, no beer, just saying. Anyway.
Okay. No, it's called the Atlanta Freethought Hall. The society is the Atlanta Freethought Society. Michael's a board member, and it's sort of the informal historian of the group anyway. So you know more about it.
Yeah, well, the Atlanta Freethought Hall, if you look at it, it looks like a church. I mean, it doesn't have a big cross on it or anything like that. It was a primitive Baptist church is what it used to be. It's a slightly sordid tale involving stupid Georgia blue laws. So to back up, this church dated back to before the Civil War. It was a primitive Baptist congregation. The primitive Baptists, that's what they called themselves, they disagreed with the missionary Baptists over whether or not you should go and pester other people to convert. The primitive Baptists were very strict Calvinists, and they believed that if the Lord wanted you to be a Baptist, the Holy Spirit would incline you to become a Baptist, and there was no point in sending out missionaries and going door to door to convert people, unlike the missionary Baptists. As a result, the primitive Baptists sort of gradually faded and dwindled until it was just a few families meeting in this little church. Then meanwhile, some developers wanted to put in a grocery store within 1,500 feet of this church. And they wanted to be able to sell beer and wine in their grocery store, as grocery stores in Georgia usually do. And there was a stupid archaic blue law that says you cannot establish any new business within 1,500 feet or whatever it is of a church that sells alcoholic beverages, because that would be wicked, I guess. So the developers went to this handful of families and basically bought them out. And then the church was
It sat vacant for several years,
and then we finally
got vandalized.
Yeah,
we didn't buy out the Baptists. We kind of wish we did, but we didn't.
We bought the building from the real estate developers who bought it from the Baptists. The Atlanta Freethought Society, as a society, goes back many years before that, and we had a different, not as suitable home place up in Roswell, but we bought this building and we use it for our meetings.
Atlanta Freethought Society is 35 years old, something like that. It's the oldest Freethought atheist, secular humanist, any kind of thing like that group in Atlanta. And we have other groups that meet and rent from us, and we cooperate with a variety of other groups. We have a variety of meetings, but the second Sunday of every month is our regular standard program meeting. And in fact, we meet tomorrow. We hear from an excellent speaker, Dr. Scott Lilienfeld, who's a professor of psychology at Emory University and a great speaker. We've had him speak before. He's a skeptic. I don't know whether he considers himself a freethinker or an atheist. It doesn't matter. We have lots of speakers who are not necessarily freethinkers, but know something about history or science or other things that are of interest to us. Our meetings are always free and open to the public, and we're always interested in getting new members, of course. So y'all come.
Yeah.
So there's a rotation of other groups that
there are.
Is it just every Sunday there's a different group?
No, it's not. We own the building, and we're the only ones that have control over it. We actually rent the building on occasion to groups that don't have anything to do with philosophy or religion. There's some local homeowners associations nearby that don't have a place to meet that rent from us. The cemetery association that runs a cemetery across the street, across the road, meet there once a year. They don't rent. We grandfathered them in. But so the building's used by a variety of people, but we're the owners of the building.
Right.
We, the Atlanta Freethought Society, are the owners of the building.
Which is pretty, there are a lot of little atheist and freethought and humanist groups across the country, but it's pretty rare for any of our groups to actually manage to own our own building. We used to meet in a Morrison's cafeteria, and then I think we met in a lot of public libraries have a community space which you can sort of sign up for, and we met in that for a long time. But so we're kind of proud that we were able to actually swing a building of our own. We can say this is ours.
Yep.
And are you two both excited? How long, Ed, have you been going to American Atheist? Have you been going to the conferences since it's happening next weekend?
Track of exactly how many of those conferences I've been to, 6 or 8 or 10 of them. I've been to a couple of times at least when I was president of American Atheist, but I went to 1 or 2 before that and several since. And Michael and I and my wife are all 3 life members of American Atheist and of the Freedom from Religion Foundation and of the Council for Secular Humanism. I used to work for the Council for Secular Humanism many, many years ago. So I've had a lot of formal professional experience as an atheist or secular humanist. But I think the local organizations are very important. National organizations are very important. They have different but overlapping roles and different ways of supporting each other. And most of these national organizations do a pretty good job of providing some support to local groups. And most of the local groups encourage their members to support national groups too, which is the way it should be.
We were earlier talking about getting the nuns to unite more politically. One encouraging thing I've seen, this century anyway, is that the national groups seem to be a lot less at each other's throats than they used to be, and a lot more cooperative, a lot more willing to build coalitions with each other and work together on things that are of common interest. The atheists with a capital A, and the freethinkers, and the secular humanists, and the American humanists, they all will now help each other out and
there are lots of people responsible for getting the national groups to cooperate better with each other. But there's one person who gets more credit than any other one person, and that's Dr. Herb Silverman of Charleston, South Carolina, a math professor, retired. He just busted his butt to get the national organizations to work together, and the organization, what's it called?
Secular Coalition.
The Secular Coalition for America was founded as a fairly direct result of his efforts. A lot of other people involved too, but Herb's great speaker and a great raconteur.
And the Secular Coalition for America, I'd say it's very much our answer to all of these Christian Coalition and Moral Majority and all of those religious right organizations. This is our counterattack against that.
Most, if not all, of the national organizations are member organizations of the Secular Coalition for America. So we do have unity in terms of lobbying Congress and having a perspective like that. It's a 501c4 organization, not C3. So you give them a big contribution, you can't take an itemized deduction for it like you can with the Atlanta Freethought.
They have an office in Washington, and they at least are trying to make our views known to our elected officials. Another group that's not even none of the above, but Americans United for Separation of Church and State is a great group, and that includes anybody from hardcore atheists to devout Christians or other religions, as long as you believe that church and state should be separate and that that's best for everybody, and believe in religious liberty for everybody.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, as we are getting toward the end, I haven't done this in a while, but I feel like with this crowd, this might be the right thing. Do either of you have a joke to share at the end?
I was trying to remember how the joke goes, and I've lost the thread of it, of the guy who goes up to the fellow standing on the parapet of the bridge, and he's about to jump, and he says, "Brother, don't jump, value your life." And the guy says, "Well, why should I?" Nobody cares. He says, "Well, but I'm a believer. Are you a believer?"
You believe in God, don't you? Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Are you a Christian? Oh, yeah, I'm a Christian. Are you a Protestant Christian? Oh, yeah, I'm a Protestant Christian too. Are you a Baptist Christian? Yes, I'm a Baptist, the same as you. Baptist Reformation of 1848 or Baptist Reformation of 1895? Reformation of 1895, and then the guy, die heretic, and pushes him off the bridge. I think we both watched that joke.
We got the general idea. Yeah. Unity is hard to come by.
Yes.
For all of us.
We'll save the joke in the edit, just like in the book, right? Well, since we've finished, I guess this would be a little bit different, but tell everybody where they can follow you, maybe find the Atlanta Freethought Society or American Atheist, or just get your book.
Yeah. Well, as I said,
books you've done.
You can get the book at lots of libraries. You could get it in some bookstores. I think it's mostly too far out of print for that now, but you can buy it online from ABE Books or Amazon or whatever. And we want you to read the book. That's the most important thing. As far as Atlanta Freethought Society, we meet at 4775 North Church Lane in Atlanta, 30339. It's open to the public. Everybody's welcome. The American what? Yeah, tomorrow's a potluck before the speaker.
Yes.
American Atheist always welcomes new members and supporters. So do all the other national organizations. And you can find all of these organizations pretty easily on the internet. The internet might be the most important reason that there's an increase in lack of religiosity and piety and so forth. More atheists can come out of the closet and realize, oh yeah, there are lots of other atheists. I'm not alone, when they look online and find plenty of other people with kindred ideas. But we're interested in meeting new people and writing more letters to the editor and that sort of thing.
You can find us at www.atlantafreethought.org or facebook.com/Atlanta Freethought. So we do have our little web presence there.
Yeah. Laura Ross is the president of Atlanta Freethought Society. Has been for several years. Good lady. And we all start out with bad jokes.
Yes.
She starts. So I should have remembered some of her bad jokes.
Yeah, it's a perfect way to get rolling. So thank you, Ed and Michael Buckner, for being on the show this week.
We appreciate it. We were honored to be a part of it. And we look forward to hearing more about Zachrilege Cast.
Yeah.
Oh, you will.
Good. Take care.
That's partly why I favor compulsory religious instruction in schools. Because I know of no other way to guarantee the steady mass production of atheism
Live read. I've been in a bit of a personal void this week with some family issues, and also don't have a lot of time for content when I ended up spending most of my time reading finally the book that the Hamilton musical is based on, and finishing the final games of Game of Thrones book, at least the final book based on the HBO series, or vice versa, while also listening to a podcast about the show and trying to watch the show one last time prior to season 8. I also had a free watch-a-thon deal with my cable company, so I got through most of season 4 of The Magicians, and it's a really good kind of Hogwarts, but with young adults, although I think their annual musical episode needs to go. I missed a week or two, so go to the way back, sort of back machine and check out the GAM episode about Unplanned. This is the movie by the woman who used to work for Planned Parenthood and now is a professional liar working for the conservative evangelical anti-abortion cabal who hates women. The best part about the episode is we get little side talks with Lucinda, who tells the truth about lies in the movie, and judging by my hate subscription to the National Review, the lies have become the truth for some. And if you're going to American Atheist convention this next weekend in Cincinnati, have fun, hang with friends, and make it your conference, make it your movement. Don't tell anyone else how to be. Or don't let anyone else tell you how to be. I can read. Want to support the show? Be like Bobby, Hugh, Teote, Larry, Daryl, and the other Daryl, and Freethinker215. Support the show on patreon.com/Zachrilege, Zachrilege. Follow me on Twitter, like the Zachrilege Cast page on Facebook, and send all mail to zachrilege.cast@gmail.com. Always looking for guest suggestions. Thanks to Ed and Michael Buckner for being on tonight. Buy their book. Go to American Atheist if you can, and if you can't, be jealous like me and check in through social media. I'll have on Gail Jordan of Recovering from Religion this week. Sarah Levin of Secular Coalition for America will be on soon, and holy shit, I need to get more guests. So until next week, let's continue the conversation.